There's a moment that Taurus knows well. It's not a fight, it's not blatant betrayal, it's nothing you could show someone and say, "Look, this happened." It's more silent. It's the moment when you're in the middle of a completely normal conversation and your stomach does something strange, or when you're with someone who says the right words, smiles at the right moment, and yet there's a pressure in your chest that you didn't ask for and can't explain. Or when a situation ends too well, and instead of relief you feel weight, that nameless weight. You've already tried ignoring it. You've told yourself it was an exaggeration, insecurity, that you were being difficult. After all, what argument could you give? My body felt something doesn't convince anyone. Maybe it didn't even convince you. But what if these sensations weren't problems to solve? What if they were data? What if what you feel before you think was the most accurate intelligence system you have, and you've spent years trying to turn it off because no one taught you what it was saying? Taurus isn't the sign that distrusts everything. Taurus is the sign that feels before any analysis, and that's a level of perception most people will never have. But when you don't understand what you're feeling, you start treating it as a flaw. And the most precise instrument you carry begins to be silenced by the very person who should be protecting you. Today we're going to talk about 3 specific sensations, 3 signs that Taurus receives when someone is hiding something, and about what happens when you learn to recognize them by name. There's something Taurus does that nobody can quite explain. It's not distrust, it's not jealousy, it's not stubbornness. It's something much more subtle, much more precise, and much more frightening than it seems at first glance. Have you ever had that feeling that something was wrong, without any proof, without a word spoken, without a clear gesture, without any concrete reason, but your body simply knew? And your mind tried to convince you that it was an exaggeration, that it was insecurity, that you were making it up, and you remained silent because, after all, what argument could you give? I feel that something is wrong is not proof of anything, but it was real. It always was real. This is not a flaw of Taurus, it's the opposite. There's a very widespread belief about this sign that needs to be debunked. People think Taurus distrusts everything, as if it were a rigid stance, an armor, a choice. As if Taurus wakes up in the morning and decides to be difficult, to deceive, but that's not it. Taurus doesn't distrust. Taurus senses, and there's a huge difference between those two things. Distrust is a mental decision. It's reasoning, it's analysis. You collect data, compare patterns, and arrive at a conclusion. But what Taurus does precedes all of that. It precedes analysis. It precedes even conscious perception. The Taurus body registers what's in the environment before the mind has time to process anything. It's like a seismograph that detects the tremor before anyone on the surface feels the ground move. The seismograph doesn't distrust the earthquake. It simply registers it with precision, coldness, and accuracy. Venus rules Taurus, and most people understand Venus only as beauty, as pleasure, as aesthetics. But Venus is also sensory perception. It's the ability to grasp quality, the quality of a moment, of a presence, of an intention. Taurus is an earth sign, which means it exists in the body before it exists in the mind. It processes the world through the skin, the stomach, the pressure in the chest, the weight in the air. While other signs try to understand what is happening, Taurus has already felt it. And that's exactly why the 3 sensations we're going to talk about today are so specific, so recognizable, and so unsettling, because when you name them, you'll immediately know you've felt them before, probably several times. And you'll remember moments when you ignored them, when you let them pass, when you told yourself, "No, it must be all in my head." But it wasn't. The first sensation is the most common and the most ignored. It has no official name. Taurus doesn't call it anything because it never needed to. It simply appears. It's a kind of weight. It might be in the chest. It might be in the stomach. Sometimes it's as if the air becomes heavier in the presence of a specific person after a conversation that ended too well to be true. It's not pain. It's not anxiety in the clinical sense. It's more like a silent warning, as if something inside you gently pulled the handbrake, without alarm, without drama, just that gentle resistance that says, wait, pay attention. A barometer falls before the storm, before a cloud appears in the sky, before any visible sign that the weather is about to change. The instrument registers because the air pressure has already changed, and this change is not visible, not audible to the ordinary senses. Taurus is that instrument. When the weight appears on Taurus's chest for no apparent reason, the ambient pressure has already changed. Something in the energy of the situation, of the person, of the dynamics is no longer where it should be. And Taurus's body, registered first, always registers first. And now you're here trying to remember all the times you felt this weight and didn't listen, trying to understand why you ignored something that was so physical, so real. Why your mind convinced you that your body was exaggerating. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. It's not about astrology in the technical sense. It's about the kind of intelligence that Taurus possesses, and that it often dismisses because the world around it lacks the vocabulary for it. It talks about how to build confidence with what you feel before you think, how to stop treating your own internal system as an enemy, how to stop apologizing for the precision you have. You are now in a specific moment. You have just recognized something within yourself. This recognition is still alive, and it is precisely in this state that this material makes the most sense. Not later, not when life calms down. Now, while the question remains unanswered. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt this weight without knowing where it came from? When was the last time you ignored this sign and then discovered it was right? Because he was there. He was almost always there. But let's continue, because that first sensation, the heaviness, is just the beginning. There's a second one that's even more disconcerting, and which Taurus most of the time doesn't even recognize as a warning sign. They recognize it as tiredness. They recognize it as introversion. They recognize it as that way you don't want to talk much today. But that's not it. It's a strange calm. Have you ever been inexplicably calm in a situation that should have disturbed you? Someone said something that should have hurt you, or did something that should have provoked a reaction, and instead of reacting, you just stood there, still, quiet, almost detached from yourself. And then you wondered if you were okay, if you were feeling anything, if there was something wrong with you because you hadn't been able to react in the right way. Nothing was wrong. Everything was working perfectly, because this calmness is not peace, it's not indifference, it's not emotional disinterest, it's maximum alertness. It's the way in which all of Taurus's systems stop making noise so that nothing, absolutely nothing, escapes perception, like animals becoming completely still before an earthquake, not because they are calm, because they are in total listening mode. Every sense concentrated, every receptor fully open, processing the entire environment simultaneously without emitting any signal back. It's the most sophisticated way of reading the environment that exists, and it seems like silence on the outside because, on the inside, it's the highest level of processing that Taurus has access to. Think of a military radar. When it's scanning the horizon looking for something, it doesn't make a sound. It doesn't blink. It doesn't announce that it's working. It simply collects, processes, maps. And only after it has enough information does the system send a response. Taurus, in this strangely calm state, is exactly that, a maximum range radar that chose to stop transmitting in order to receive more clearly. And here's the real problem. When Taurus enters this mode and doesn't understand what's happening inside, it starts interpreting this calmness as coldness, as emotional hardness, as if it were distancing itself from something that matters, as if it were losing the ability to feel. And then it does what it has learned to do throughout life. It tries to force the emotion back. It tries to convince itself that it should be reacting. It tries to get out of listening mode because it seems wrong, inadequate, almost frightening to be so quiet. And in doing so, it shuts down the very system that was about to deliver the most important information it could receive at that moment. The radar that starts emitting mid-scan loses part of its reading. The animal that moves before the earthquake's full signal loses its balance. A bull, when it tries to react at a moment when its system is in full reception mode, cuts the thread of its own intelligence at the worst possible moment. And then, days or weeks later, when the truth about that situation or that person somehow emerges, it remembers that moment of strange calm and thinks with disturbing clarity, I knew that day. My body knew, you knew. Your system was operating at maximum power. You just didn't have the vocabulary to understand what that profound silence meant. And so you treated the clearest signal as no signal at all. If you're starting to realize you need real tools to begin reading these signals clearly, not ignoring them, not exaggerating them, but truly understanding what your internal system is communicating, the digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, was built precisely for this need. It works with the silent language of Taurus, that intelligence that operates below the level of speech, below conscious analysis, in the place where the body decides before the mind has formed any thought. It's not about blindly trusting what you feel. It's about learning to distinguish signal from noise with the precision that Taurus has always had, but rarely used to its advantage. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And there's a third feeling. This one is the hardest to admit, not because it hurts more than the others, but because Taurus usually interprets it as a character flaw, as proof that they are cold, that they are difficult, that they can't truly commit to the bonds that matter. It's an involuntary deviation, a retreat, a distancing that happens before any conscious decision. You're in a conversation, in a situation, with someone, and suddenly you realize you've taken a step back without knowing when it happened, that you responded with less openness than usual, that you created a millimeter of distance that definitely wasn't there before. And the most disturbing part is that you didn't plan any of this. You didn't choose it. Your body made the decision before you did. Think of a hand pulling away from a flame before the brain registers the heat. The nervous system detects the temperature and sends the recoil signal before any conscious thought is formed. Before you even think this is hot, your hand has already moved. It's not a choice. It's protection operating at maximum speed. It's the system functioning as efficiently as possible, without asking permission, without waiting for analysis, without awaiting rational confirmation to act. Taurus does this with people, with situations, with dynamics that haven't yet revealed their true nature, but have already sent some signal that the Taurus body picked up before any conscious radar registered it. This involuntary deviation isn't coldness. It's not sabotaging a relationship. It's the fastest protection system in existence, operating in real time, with surgical precision and zero drama. And yet, Taurus blames itself for this with an intensity that is sometimes cruel. Taurus thinks, why did I distance myself? I didn't want to distance myself. Am I afraid to get close? Am I difficult to love? Do I sabotage good things when they appear? And this intense self-criticism, this completely wrong diagnosis of its own behavior, is what makes Taurus try to urgently reverse the retreat. To try to compensate for the natural distancing by forcing proximity where the system said not to force it. And sometimes in doing so, it gets close exactly where it shouldn't have gotten. The system warned clearly. Taurus didn't recognize the warning as a warning, and he paid the price later with that familiar feeling of, I knew it. From the beginning, I knew it wasn't right, and I went anyway. Recognizing involuntary deviation as a protective mechanism and not as proof of some emotional flaw is one of the most liberating transformations Taurus can make. And that's exactly what the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose delves into. How Taurus can learn to work with this system instead of against it. How to stop correcting the retreat that is pure protection and start understanding the difference between withdrawal that serves a purpose and withdrawal that is old fear disguised as intuition. This distinction changes everything, and the book delivers it with the precision that Taurus's nature deserves. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now comes the most awkward part of this whole conversation, because up until now, we've talked about the Taurus system as if it functioned in isolation, as if once you name the three sensations, Taurus automatically listens to them and acts on them. But we know that's not the case. We know because you've experienced the opposite. You felt the weight. You entered the strange calm. You took the involuntary step back, and yet you stayed. Why? It's not weakness. It's not stupidity. It's not a lack of self-esteem, although the world likes to reduce it to that when it doesn't understand. It's something much more specific to the nature of Taurus. Something that has to do with what Taurus needs most and fears most at the same time, the stability of the bond, the security of what has been built with time and care, the visceral resistance to dismantling something that took so long to build. Taurus is the sign that plants, that invests time, energy, real presence, and that understands almost instinctively that true bonds aren't formed overnight. That's genuine wisdom. A rare skill in a world where you discard as quickly as you adopt. But this same wisdom has a blind spot. When Taurus has already invested, when it has already planted, watered, waited the entire season, there's enormous resistance to accepting that what has grown isn't what it should have grown. Because abandoning it doesn't just feel like losing a person or a situation. You feel like you're losing all the time invested, all the care put in, every bet made. It's like a fortress that identified the threat, that received the alert, that processed the signal, and yet kept its gates open, not out of naivete, but because the isolation that would follow the decision seemed heavier than the threat itself. And so Taurus stays, with eyes open, with the system functioning, knowing and choosing to stay anyway because the alternative at that moment seemed impossible to bear. And here, in this paradox, between what the system knows and what the heart still can't let go of, is where Taurus most needs real guidance, not someone saying go away or stay, but something that helps understand why this conflict exists, what it's revealing about the deepest layers of who you are, and how to start making decisions that come from the system, not against it. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose comes in exactly here, at the point where Taurus knows but still can't act on what they know. The book works on the root of this pattern, why Taurus sometimes prefers known pain to unknown freedom, and offers a way out of this cycle without having to become a different person, just a version of you that trusts more in what you've always known. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. This is not cowardice. It is the most human and genuine conflict that Taurus carries. The tension between what the system knows and what the heart is not yet ready to abandon. Between the intelligence of the body and loyalty to what has been built with one's own hands. The problem is the cost, and that cost doesn't appear all at once. It appears as chronic fatigue that has no clear explanation, like a feeling that the cycles repeat themselves with different people, but always arrive at the same place. Like that phrase that Taurus thinks quietly and rarely says aloud, "I knew it. From the beginning, I knew it." When the alarm system is silenced too many times, it begins to calibrate differently. The feeling of heaviness becomes less pronounced, like a reduced volume. The strange calm becomes normalized as a way of being. The involuntary deviation is corrected before it even happens in anticipation, because Taurus has learned that doing so creates less friction in the moment. And then one day, Taurus looks back and realizes that they are profoundly exhausted, without being able to pinpoint exactly when it started, because each individual decision seemed reasonable at the time. The system that was gradually silenced hasn't disappeared. It's still there, waiting to be reactivated, waiting for someone to give it what it has always deserved: recognition. And reactivation doesn't require Taurus to become distrustful. It doesn't require closing doors to the world. It doesn't require becoming a different person. It requires something much more specific and much more accessible: learning the difference between the real signal and the emotional noise, between the weight that is given and the anxiety that is an echo of something old, between the detour that is legitimate protection and the withdrawal that is fear disguised as caution. Taurus possesses one of the most precise emotional intelligence systems in the zodiac. The issue has never been the quality of the instrument. It's been the vocabulary used to read it and the ability to trust it without needing external validation. The three sensations we discussed today, the heaviness, the strange calmness, the involuntary deviation, are not an exaggeration. They are not symptoms of someone who has difficulty with relationships. They are facts. High-quality information arriving through channels that most people don't have access to, in a format that the world rarely teaches to recognize. They are Taurus, functioning at the most refined level of its nature, and being misunderstood precisely because of that. The only thing Taurus needs to learn, perhaps the most important thing in this whole conversation, is to stop apologizing for having this system, to stop trying to turn it off to seem easier to love, simpler to understand, more normal, within expectations that were never made for someone who feels with this depth, to stop treating as emotional excess what has always been, from the beginning, the most sophisticated intelligence you possess. The Taurus body doesn't lie. It never has. Sometimes it whispers when it should shout, because Taurus has learned over time not to give space to the shout, to contain, to calibrate, to wait. But the whisper was right. It always has been. And the silence it generated also said something. It said that the instrument was working, even when you so desperately needed it to simply stop. Trusting that whisper doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the world. It doesn't mean distrusting everything by default. It means knowing yourself deeply enough to know when what you feel is a genuine sign, and having the courage to treat it as real data, not as a hypothesis that needs proof before being taken seriously. That's the intelligence of Taurus. Silent, precise, incredibly ancient, and more reliable than any word anyone has ever said about you.